during this very challenging time where we had to be forced to be separate from our friends and our colleagues, I was really grateful for this Anchor app, which has allowed me to continue the podcast after almost 1 year of working on it. It's free. You simply go to anchor.fm and download the app. And there you'll find all the tools that you need to record and edit your podcast, as well as to invite people onto your podcast through the app. Anchor also distributes the podcast for you on Apple, Spotify, and many other platforms. You have absolutely nothing to do except to record your podcast. If you have an ad like this, you can also make money. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I would recommend it for anyone who wants to get their voice out there, has something to contribute. Go for it. Anchor.fm is where you go to download the free app and to get started. Good luck with your podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. Today we're speaking with Marta Jovanovic. She's based in Belgrade, but she's lived pretty much everywhere. I met her in New York, where she was based for 20 years, and she's lived in Rome as well. I think it's interesting to hear what's going on in Belgrade right now in terms of the art scene and what Marta is doing with her own work there. I hope you enjoy this.
Hi, Nicolette. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to hear your voice again.
Likewise. It's been a while.
Yes. I was thinking about your last name, and I'm sure I've said it before, but can you repeat it again for me so I pronounce it?
Absolutely. It's Jovanovic.
Jovanovic, yes. So I had it right,
Yes.
except I didn't change the J to the Y. Jovanovic. So tell me... Go ahead.
No, I said you're good with all the languages that you speak. It's you're a rare person who has no problem with my last name.
But I'm not... You're Serbian, is that it?
Yes.
So tell me where you're based now. You moved back there about 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and a lot of my work is actually about identity. You asked me if I'm Serbian. I was born in ex-Yugoslavia, so I practically left the country or started leaving the country while it was still Yugoslavia, and then it changed into a Republic of Serbia and Montenegro, and then it became Serbia. And I think that as it sort of changed and mutated, my identity also went somewhere else, because meanwhile I became Italian. I lived in Italy for many years, and then I lived in New York for many years, where you and I met.
Yes.
And then, yes, I came back, 4 years ago, because I founded an education platform in Belgrade called Performance Hub. I thought that, when I reached a certain age and a certain experience, let's put it that way, that it was sort of time for me to give something back, to my hometown, and to more than to my hometown, let's say to young people just starting. Serbia is not a wealthy country, and there are a lot of young and not so young artists that wanted to venture into performance, but there was not always an opportunity. They couldn't afford to go and study abroad. They didn't have a chance, to participate in international workshops and so on and so forth. So I have decided to bring the international artists to Serbia and to actually give artists in Serbia opportunity to work with some of the amazing performers from all over the world.
Wow, that sounds really ambitious, but knowing a little bit about you, I think it will work quite well.
Well, we are in the 5th year now. We are actually celebrating our 5th birthday. Well, we wanted to celebrate it this summer, but it's not going to be possible because of the, overall world situation, the post-COVID. And, I also don't feel, to be honest with you, I don't feel at all like it is the moment of celebration right now. I think we need to be very strong, very steady, I think we need to support each other very strongly
Mm-hmm.
in the moments that we are going through, especially you guys in the US.
Right. Yeah, I think everyone is pretty much on the same page with you. I
Yeah.
mean, they're small private celebrations, but no one's going all out right now.
Yeah, I have to say that, I mean, I spent 20 years of my life in America. I studied in the US and I was born as an artist in New York, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, I'm actually really mad right now that I'm not there, you know, that I cannot take the streets with you, you know, that I
Yeah.
cannot participate actively. But, you know, from here, I try and do as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for artists, especially who have been a part of the fabric of the city, a lot of them have that sentiment. And perhaps all of these upheavals will make an environment that is more conducive to creative stuff. Because everyone recently was lamenting the loss of creative life in New York and leaving and whatever. So we'll see what comes out of it. Hopefully, good.
Yes, yes, it must come out. Good things must come out of this, I think.
Yes.
I'm very positive and very hopeful, and yes.
Well, tell me a little bit about what you do. I mean, do you work out of a studio in Belgrade or how does it work? Tell me what is performance art for you, because I think mostly you're a performance art based uh,
Right,
artist.
right. Well, performance art for me is the live thing. You know, it's about physical presence.
Mm-hmm.
I have been completely deprived of that, like everybody, in the past few months. And I was actually teaching a class online with the ECC Performance Art that is based in Holland, and it's a wonderful education platform. And one of the questions was exactly that: what is performance art, and how
Mm-hmm.
do we deal now with that lack of liveness? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit that artists that I had worked with have been fantastic in creating performance artworks for the camera, for online, for the class, you know, and I
Right.
think we had managed to keep that liveness. I work alone and together with the audience, so my
Mm-hmm.
my performances are participatory.
Mm-hmm.
But what I love about performance and what I love about the work that I do in particular is that I create a certain frame
Mm-hmm.
where the action is suggested,
Mm-hmm.
both from my part and both in the participatory performances. And
Mm-hmm.
then I sort of let things happen, you know. And I think that spontaneity, that co-creation, that co-creativity, together with the audience, is what brings out the final artwork.
So, can you describe, for example, your last performance? I'm not sure where it was or who was involved with it.
Sure. My last performance was quite exciting because not as a performance itself, but because I tried to venture into new technologies. So I created a performance in virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big step for me because I'm very, you know, in performance, archive is extremely important because it's the only thing that we leave behind. Performance is a one-time thing, you know, you experience it live there and then it's gone. And what remains in terms of documentation is what is really important further further disseminating that particular
Mm-hmm.
work and that particular piece. And this is how today we can look at, I don't know, the work of Carolee Schneemann, for example. You know, there's the works that she did in the 60s is because there were
Mm-hmm.
photographs in her writings. And, you know, this is what remains that we can later possibly study or exhibit or, you know, keep in
Right.
some archive somewhere. And I was very skeptical. I'm always very skeptical when it comes to documentation. So I did a series. It was a 2 year long process. At the Belgrade Biennial in September of 2018, I've done a mermaid piece. So I was laying on the concrete floor, and the audience was coming in waves, and
Mm-hmm.
they were pouring buckets of water over me, trying to revive me. Obviously, I was not going to become a mermaid, you know, but it's about that. The idea was that, that old archetype of that woman who is a sex symbol but can't really have sex, because she's half
Mhm.
fish,
Mhm.
who has this wonderful voice, hair, and tits, but in essence, you can't do anything with her. She's
Mhm.
this longing, this far away thing, that
Mhm.
lures you into your death without even, being able to experience her.
Right.
And I thought that, that was a way for me to sort of drown all the ideas of what a woman should be. We talk a lot about gender and about, feminist theories by now are slowly but being integrated into the society. But I think, especially in certain parts of the world, it's still not enough, and women are not free, and they're still just archetypes. So I brought that work, which was done for the audience, a little bit modified. So I was actually in the second version that happened in the summer of 2019. I was laying on the pile of ice, and the warmth of my body was melting that pile of ice. And we recorded that in virtual reality. Then was
Wow.
that watched. So the audience came to the gallery a few months later and just had headsets to watch the performance. So I was
Mhm.
there only in virtual reality. I wasn't present there, but
Right.
the performance did happen. So it was a bit of a shift in time, when the
Mhm.
audience was allowed to actually watch the performance. And it was an interesting idea of how we perceive time, what performance actually is, how we document performance, and yeah, all the usual questions.
Right. And I think in some ways, these performances have made you a good person to document as well in mainstream media. I know you've done a few appearances in articles or on covers, stuff like that. I mean, tell us how that comes about and how it helps to promote your other art.
Well, that came about, I think, 10 years ago, when I was young and hot. And that I think that as much as it maybe helped me to promote my work, it also very much made things difficult for me in terms of being taken serious as an artist, And I'm not the first one, if you think of Hannah Wilke, who, until she
Mhm.
actually recorded herself dying in a hospital, the intravenous series, I
Mhm.
think no one really took her serious as an artist. I think that physical appearance, and you know that because you're a very beautiful woman, is
Mhm.
something. It's something that is a complicated gift of nature that is always a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
So I think I got into being a little bit of a fashion. How would I put that? I became attractive to fashion designers and to glossy magazines, for
Mhm.
my art, but also for the fact that the clothes were looking good, and the makeup was looking good, and so on and so forth. But I think that I had managed to surf that wave in a relatively good way, because I would always just talk about art, and not only my art, but the art of the artists that I would collaborate with, and about Performance Hub, which is my platform. And
Mhm.
I tangoed with that glossy world, even though I'm
Mhm.
in essence not part of it at all,
Right.
to promote performance art.
And you do some other types of art too. For example, this recent thing, this film that you were involved in. You want to
Yeah,
talk about that?
sure. Robert Adanto, who is a U.S. Movie director, and he made several wonderful movies on art and artists. I was recommended to him by the New York curator and scholar Kati Batista. I
Mm-hmm.
had a show in New York at that time, and she said, "Well, in your film, which was at the time he was filming The F Word, and he was working with different female artists in New York at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and she suggested that I be in his film. So he came and he saw my show, and those are his words. He said, and I thought this woman deserves a whole film on her own." And meanwhile, I left New York and I started working in Belgrade, building my education platform. And working here, I did several performances, very strong performances, very personal performances. One is titled Love, the other is titled Motherhood. I elaborated a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of personal things and personal drama that was happening to me at that time. And Robert
Mm-hmm.
called me and he said, I'd really like to make a short film about, I said, sure, but you'll have to come to Belgrade because right now I'm working in Belgrade. So he said, no, no problem, it's fine. He hopped on the flight and he came here, and we quickly agreed, that he would, follow me around a little bit, do several interviews. But it so happened that my life at that moment in time, um, shit hit the fan, excuse my French.
Yeah.
And he captured it all on camera, including those performances that I just mentioned. Which for the first time I let the movie director also document my performances, and we had an amazing team here in Belgrade that caught all that on the camera. We had drones filming, and it was kind of a new adventure for me.
Wow.
The film is doing really well. It just got the award at the Art of Brooklyn Film Festival, and I'm really excited about that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have obviously dynamic emotions towards the film, because it's a part of my life that maybe I would like to forget and not remember it. It was the interview that I listened to the other day that you did with Simon Depury, and
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about his friend and this lawsuit that he had, and he said how while it lasted, it brings the past back into your current life. It was bringing him back into the past. Meanwhile, we really need to move on with our lives, live the current moment and look into the future and not be always dragged into the past. And that resonated very much for me, and that's why with the film I have quite dynamic emotions, because it's the part of my life that I would like to forget. But then on the other hand, it's a great document, personal and work-wise, that I have.
Yes, no, I absolutely understand that. And I look forward to seeing it. I mean, I'm not sure when I'm going to get over to the Brooklyn Film Festival, but if it's out on other platforms eventually, please let me know.
I will absolutely. I absolutely will.
And if you could, I mean, I don't know what was the traumatic experience that was part of the film, but perhaps you could describe your working process, like how you come up with this idea and then eventually make it happen, how you decide what to use. I don't know. What's your process like?
Well, it changes over time. I
Mm-hmm.
think when I started performing, it was a hardcore intellectual process. I would study a certain topic that resonated with me. I would analyze it. I would imagine different scenarios that over time, and I mean, sometimes years, sometimes 5, sometimes, it depends. I would then eventually go out and do the actual performance. I think that changed for me very much in 2016, as it became a really strong emotional instinct. Like I remember, for example, creating the performance Motherhood. I was insulted by my ex-husband, who said, "Well, you never became a woman because you never became a mother," and that just offended me on a very deep female level.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
offended inside of me. It offended all the women that I know that have decided not to become mothers,
Mm-hmm.
that offended all the women that are mothers that have daughters,
Mm-hmm.
that offended all the women that are mothers that have sons, who maybe one day will decide not to procreate, and
And the
it's
women who have children and regret that they had them.
absolutely, absolutely, so there are all these levels and layers, and I thought it was such a um, primordial and stupid thing to say. And I
Yeah.
remember yeah, I just thought it was a really stupid thing to say. And so what I did is I wanted to make a work, that was my personal take on that insult that I felt very, very deeply. And and I was thinking, okay, I didn't become a mother. What have I become? And I thought I became a person that I always wanted to be, and especially with that divorce, I finally became the person uh, that I truly am. And so what I have done is actually I have turned all my opportunities to become a mother into gold by not becoming a mother. And I calculated all my fertile days, let's say from the first time I had my period. And well, actually, not fertile days, but opportunities, because a woman has an opportunity once a month to become a mother. And I bought eggs at the Belgrade market. I that correspond to the number of my opportunities to become a mother, and I hung them in a very fine gauze. I hung them on the floor of the gallery in Belgrade, and I smashed them all with a hammer. And so, I destroyed my opportunities to become a mother. But then what did remain? I made a performance. And then later, I actually managed to turn physically all those smashed eggs or what remained, from them through an electromorphing process, first into copper, and then we gold plated those handmade sculptures with 24 karat gold. So I practically now have an almost 300 sculptures of 24K gold, that my motherhood, that represents my motherhood. And I know,
Right.
and I don't think just, I think your motherhood as well. And, uh, every woman's and every man's notion of what motherhood should be. It should be a personal choice, and it should be, what we decide of it to be, and not what society strain us to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think of other people who have, let's say, gone into a convent. I don't want to use Mother Teresa because she's sometimes a controversial figure, but
Right.
then they go on to mother hundreds of thousands of children. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Yeah,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I consider my students also my kids.
absolutely.
I think everything that I have to give, and I am a giving person. I'm someone who wants to give. I don't know if I
Hmm.
always do it the right way for the people to see it or to be able to receive it on their end. But
Hmm.
I love to give. So I don't feel like any of my will to give goes into waste. On the contrary.
Right. Well, it always comes around somehow.
Right,
Um,
right.
I was saying to my son the other day because he's into games right now and he always likes to win, win, win. So then he'll say he's really into winning. So then he'll say some things so the other person loses, like, "Oh, you get a two," or you. I said, "Don't say anything bad about the other person because that's just gonna come back to you." But it's the same with good. You say you do good
Right,
things, it comes back as well.
right, right,
So
right.
tell me what the art scene is like over there. What happens in Belgrade right now in terms of contemporary art or art in general?
Well, Belgrade is extremely dynamic right now, and it has been. I think, I think artists, one way or the other, they thrive under really harsh circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happening in Belgrade. There is a lot of struggle. There is no money.
Mm-hmm.
Artists don't have enough exposure. There are no venues.
Mm-hmm.
And what really lacks here is the art market. I know we always love and hate art market, and there is
Mm-hmm.
always, but I don't think that artists can survive if they're not paid for their work, and if their work doesn't get bought or sold. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest lacks in Belgrade and in Serbia. But artists are extremely courageous. performance history here is very, very strong. The legacy of performance art here is very strong. Marina Abramovic comes from Belgrade. She was 30 years old when she left Belgrade. Yes, she became a star somewhere else, but she made some of the really important works here in the 70s, and she was extremely involved with the art scene, and she's one of the absolute pioneers. But there are also other artists who are who were a part of that group, like Rasha Todosievich, for example, who really left a strong imprint on the art mind, let's put it that way, that developed here and that was developing here. Performance art was dead, let's say, from the late 80s and during the 90s, because there was a war in ex-Yugoslavia in 1990s. But as of the early 2000s, the scene is becoming vibrant again, and there are a lot of artists, coming out of not only Serbia and Belgrade, but also the whole Balkans, that are extremely interesting. I would love you to come to Belgrade. We spoke about it before.
Yeah,
I would very much.
I will definitely take you up on that.
Please be my guest. Be my guest. I would love that.
Yeah, I have never been, and I've generally had good relations with anyone I met from that part of the world.
Right.
It's funny, yeah.
Right.
But what about your own personal plans for work and the future? Like, I know it's a little difficult with the world being a little bit in upheaval, but what do you have planned for the next few years for your own work?
Well, my own work is going ahead. There is a big and important project in Serbia um, that unfortunately I can't talk about because because I'm not alone in it, and it's on the state level, and I would love to work with in education of incarcerated women. We started the process at the beginning of the year, but then the COVID hit in, so you cannot get into a prison right now.
Yes.
But the idea is to bring art into a female prison and use it as a rehabilitation tool. And yes, that's all I can say. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but it's
that sounds like a really good uh, program. It sounds like
yes,
a good
and
plan.
it's a project of several years, and it's something that I am really really excited about. But meanwhile, I became a professor at the Rome University of Fine Arts, and the school year should start sometime in late October, early November, if everything goes right. So I divide my time between Rome and Belgrade. And I am planning on. Uh, um, I really got hooked onto this whole VR documentation in the performance, and I next year I'm planning to do another intervention that is quite challenging. For me, I have learned that I cannot. It could also be the fact that I'm aging, but I have realized, especially because I do performances that are quite rough. In the performance Love, for example, my rib was broken. Yeah, the first Mermaid that I did in 2018, because I was laying for almost 2 hours on this frozen concrete floor in cold water. I was sick for 4 weeks after that, and the ice melting last year was also quite rough. So I try
Yeah.
to do intense things not more than once a year.
Yeah, no, I think in general, all of this stuff takes a toll on your body, no matter how physically strong you are.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, like a dancer.
Yes, exactly. It's, you also, if you want to keep on doing rough things, you have to do it smartly, in order to, when you do the next thing, you're there, your body's there 100%.
Yes, yes. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add that I didn't ask you? Because we're almost at our time.
Not that I can remember, but I wanted to really thank you for this. It's amazing to catch up with you, even though it was me talking the whole time.
Well, that's really what it's about, you know. I mean, my stuff is not really anything without the contribution of all the people like yourself who are on the podcast. So we love it.
Yes, thank you.
We're
And
very
I
happy.
have to admit that you have interviewed some wonderful people, and I'm extremely honored to be in that bunch.
Well, thanks for making the time, and we'll catch up soon. I mean, you know, I'm gonna be in Europe for a few days in July, and I think I'll be back again this summer. I'm just not sure where. I haven't really confirmed plans, so I'll let you know
Please
how
be in
things go.
touch.
And yeah, a friend of mine is gonna have an exhibition in Rome. If I come, I will send the dates to you, and maybe you're there at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love
All right,
that. I would
I'll
love
keep you
that.
posted. Take
Fantastic.
care, babe.
Absolutely. You too. Big
Thanks
hug.
again. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Bees and Honey podcast. I hope you had a good time listening to Marta's story, and hopefully we'll see you again next week on another episode. Stay well.